to another edition of the Ad Podcast. We've got some great OG veterans from the streaming and video industry that are also doing some pioneering new things in the education space. Troy Snyder is a foundational pioneer of internet video plumbing as the co-founder and CEO of Night Systems. Troy created streamOS, the internet's very first video content management system, before scaling media delivery networks as VP and executive producer at Akamai Technologies. Alongside him is Randy Levine, a veteran champion of charter school innovation, community revitalization, and structural philanthropy. Randy and Troy also did a lot of work together in the early days of powering live streaming in the internet video, the video internet as we know it today, that's responsible for over 75% of internet consumption, changing quickly with the rapid advance of LLMs and the AI industry, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Troy and Randy serve as the driving forces behind Wonderful Foundations, a unique public charity that buys, upgrades, and secures payment facilities for charter schools, completely eliminating predatory rent models. But they aren't just changing the physical buildings. They're reshaping the student experience through Wonderful FieldTrips, a cutting-edge experiential learning program that takes kids out of the classroom and drops them into real-world modules covering design thinking, digital fabrication, personal branding, and a host of other real-world skills. Today, we're bridging heavy technology delivery with real-world social impact, looking at how to turn a field trip into a lifetime turning point and what it actually takes to scale a modern foundation. Troy, Randy, welcome to the show. Appreciate you guys hopping on and telling us a little bit about what you guys are up to these days.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks very much.
So I know I gave a little bit of a quick mouthful there, but maybe you guys can contextualize it a little bit. So maybe you could give me a little bit of background on, where you each grew up, where'd you study, and how'd you get involved in kind of the early days of internet video, and what led you down the philanthropy road? Because that's, somewhat of a pivot, but, usually when guys go out there and have great careers and do successful things, they try and figure out a way to give back. So not totally out of left field, but would love to hear more about the evolution from your perspective.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll start here. Maybe a synchronicity for Randy and I is we both come from Western New York long ago. We're roughly, kind of the same age here. So we probably are both kind of formed and impressioned by a lot of the same cultural aspects of life, which likely puts us side by side in a lot of rooms, maybe all of them. And I'd say, over the years together, we found ourselves in that, kind of similar common ground over and over again. So something happens in that, early childhood or forming that I think sets us on all these directions, if you will. But, I guess I'd start by saying a couple things. It occurs to me after the experience I've had with Wonderful that, almost all of us have had this teacher, and it's like in 3rd grade or 9th grade. And Dylan, you can tell me the name of yours, and I can tell you the name of his or hers, right? But there's this moment kind of in our early upbringing where there's this confirmation that happens that we feel essentially seen as a real living person on the planet. And it, often is one of those teachers, again, in 3rd grade or 9th grade that makes that connection for us. And for me, that was probably one of the most, kind of powerful aspects of my life. In fact, it was 9th grade for me. I showed up at an all-boys Catholic boarding school. And for me, it was probably one of the early safe places I felt I had to sleep at night. So school for me was something much more than an academic experience. And I guess, I would start by saying that teacher in 9th grade, he was an art teacher. He had a little jewelry making shop in the back. They ended up giving me the key to. I go in there and kind of make anything I wanted. One of the things I made is a ring that I still wear today, just to kind of
wow.
But still with me in all ways. And I don't think that's ever going to change, right? So there was a deep impression there. I guess I'd say this is I left New York and kind of went out and saw the world. And early on in that journey, I was in England as the internet was kind of being born in the early 90s, and it didn't seem to be happening in England. So I left there, went to California, and was a partner in one of the early internet service providers. These are the days of dial-up, if you will. But the thing that it showed me, that experience, was really the desire and need that we all have to form connections and just feel connected and that kind of thing too. So as our whole experience of culturally overall has grown on the internet, I kind of wonder more if that's a medium of connection more than anything else, more than transmission. And I think that's relevant here, both in the approaches that Randy and I have had around not just like streaming, but also the experience that people have with the kind of delivery mechanism itself. So yeah, you can read a lot about all the things that we've done as far as to make the kind of back ends work and make this scale and get to billion user audiences and do these kind of big massive things. But I would say that we probably care more about the experience of fulfillment that someone's having on the other side of the screen, on the receive side, than on the transmit side. And that might be what sets us apart from kind of a pure engineering perspective or pure engineering mind. And so, yeah, as the story you've told, I spent a couple of decades working in and out of the kind of the media business. I would say mostly helping brands kind of develop and fulfill on their dreams of creating those connections. A lot of things happen kind of along the way in life, but one of them for me was an opportunity to become involved in an area of kind of culture that I guess I would say I wasn't really aware of, or maybe I just neglected. So I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids. Randy's a dad as well. He's got a kid. Same experience here. And so one of those experiences as a parent is school, right? And going to school and picking a school, and what's that experience like, even if you have a choice. And how fulfilled are you as a parent? How fulfilled is the kid? And I guess the parallel here is along the kind of media and entertainment route in the development of streaming. Something else was happening too, which was this thing called distance learning. And we got really active and involved in distance learning all along the way, like as it came from like how do you do kind of translations, and how do you get multiple languages, and how do you trigger slides, and just the whole kind of basic fundamentals of creating a digital experience for learning. And the thing that we found there is it just really never grew legs, and it never took hold, and there were a lot of forces that worked against it. So I would say probably our first endeavor to kind of affect change in an environment of school was probably really around distance learning, but I would say that essentially failed. Is that we couldn't kind of break the mold of traditional institutionalized education, if you will, to kind of push this stuff in there. And then, this other thing happened for me where someone kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, you've got some interesting ideas. Why don't you take a look at, this sector and see what you think? And what I was shown essentially is the core economics of school. And the thing that I could see there was that, man, the biggest expense here is the facility itself. And that if you could have an effective change on that, if these schools weren't just kind of shipping money off to landlords that was just ended up in a kind of a beach house somewhere, that if you could return that money back into the school economy, you could actually have a material impact on the quality of the education of the kid. And I'll throw some numbers out here, and I'm not trying to have a statistical discussion with you, but let's say that the average cost of education for a kid in a school in a state is around $9,000 a kid. Well, if you can kind of put the rent back in, you can take that up to like $13,000 a kid. And that's almost a 40% difference in the materiality of the quality of that education, right? So you can really do something here. So we kind of looked at that in a whiteboard setting and said, well, how would we do that? Well, the way to do that would be to create essentially a charity, a public charity that could own these assets, so that it was required or forced to, number one, is return anything that it benefited back to the people it served. But at the end of the day, you could create a pledge that allowed you to give the facility itself to the organizer of the school at the end of the financing. And that became the big push. Is like, wow, we could return, essentially 99% of anything we take in back to the community over time. That's impressive. So we started to go out there and talk about this to the folks that fund school, right? So if you're not tuned into how schools get developed and built, that's essentially banks and financing. And we started to talk to the traditional folks who finance schools and say, hey, what if we did something like this? Would you guys be interested? And Citibank came back to us loudly and said, yeah, we'd in fact like to take you out to the bond market. And so we've issued 2 tax-free municipal bonds in the bond market. So you can go trade Wonderful Foundations as a bond today. And when we did that with Citibank, this was their most successful offering ever. We went in our first offering, we asked for about a little over 200 million to go buy some schools, and we had 4 billion on demand at the sell side. So Citibank was like, you need to go find some more schools to buy. There's a big demand. Now, lots of things have happened. We went through COVID, and kind of bond markets changed, and interest markets changed, and we've done other methods of financing since then. We've done other tranches to acquire more schools. We've done some private placements and things like that too. But the thing I say is, like, from a charity perspective, what we're able to do is we're able to run schools operationally day to day, as far as making sure that teachers get paid and doors stay open and heat stays on. But additionally, we're also allowed to improve the school. So when it comes time to replace the HVAC, we can do something that's really kid friendly, or change out the glass in the windows, or build playground structures, or this, that, and the other thing, right? And if you look on our website, you'll see, I don't know, upwards of 50 projects that we've completed over the last 7 or 8 years that really have nothing to do with textbook or curriculum, but have to do with the experience that the kid has at school. So I'm going to slow down here a second and say, the phenomenon for me is like, how do you get a school to feel like a home for kids, especially in kids who that home situation feels quite challenged? Yeah, I've got kids who don't have a place to sleep at night. I've got kids who don't have breakfast to eat coming in the morning at our schools, right? And so it's like, how do we really create a nourishing environment that allows them to run to school, not from school? In that aspect that they feel as though it's a safe place for them to go and experience not just themselves, but the world around them. So I guess I'd say a couple things here. One is that we are in the business of redefining the space that we call school. We really have nothing to do with education or curriculum per se, but it's the space that this occurs inside of. And so we look at that as a way to really create this deep, nourishing environment where, like, maybe kids who don't have empty bellies in the morning, and maybe they can actually pay attention and learn more because we fed them or something like this, right? And so, as Randy started to tell you about, is one of the things that we did is we started a program about a year ago called FieldTrips to try to bring inspired experiences to kids at school. And the gating factor there for us really is that we go out into the world and you're an individual, you founded a company. In essence, if this is something that is in essence altruistic, we think that our kids want to hear how and why you do what you do. It doesn't matter what you make or really kind of the size or stature of your thing, but if it's something that you've got passion over, you're inspired into, then we think this is really a positive experience to bring to kids at schools. So as Randy told you, we looked at what's the most thing that kids are asking for, and last year it was really social media influencing. That's what the number
one. What was it, like 68% of Gen Z wants to be a content creator when they grow up?
Right.
Yeah,
so
my daughter's got 53,000 followers on Instagram already. She's not even supposed to be on the platform.
That's a good story right there. That's a good story. Secret. Yeah.
Know, right?
Yeah. Well, we probably have an agent for her after our training there, if that's helpful. But
let's go.
Yeah. But yeah, so looking at that, demand out there for that as an interest, we thought, well, what better way to do that is let's go get the people who are, really represent these folks in the world today and bring them out in front of kids. So these kids have a direct, kind of experience of what is the life of an influencer actually like? And what does that really mean when they say they want to be an influencer? And so, we've got Jesse Simon, as Randy mentioned, who's the general manager and leader of the LA Models organization, to come out, get in front of schools with us and go talk to kids. And so there's, content video out there on our website you can see and kind of share that experience yourself. And, I think what you'll find is that you're going to see a bunch of kids who had a lot of fun. They were very authentic in their expressions. There's a whole bunch of like little testimonials where they got in shots and stuff themselves. And then what we also saw is, a guy who's been doing a thing, and this is in Jesse, who got to reaffirm why he does what he does. Right, when he kind of got out of his, LA office and went out into schools in North Carolina, for example, and sat with 100 kids and heard the excitement over, hey, how do I do this? And what do I do with that? And how do I get into this? It just renewed his whole, kind of mission in life as well, too. So something is happening here that we feel is pretty magical that we were looking to really kind of scale and continue. And again, it's really just about, are you inspired by what you do and you have a story to tell? Come talk to us. Whether you fly a hot air balloon or you're an electrician, if it inspires you, we feel it's pretty likely someone or many of these kids in these classrooms are going to also be inspired.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. So many questions, but I want to start on just my ignorance around how schools get built and who owns them. So, I drive around my neighborhood here in Carlsbad, California. I pass elementary schools, middle schools, high schools that look like college campuses. They're so beautiful. My guess is, these schools are built because we live in a high income, high value geography here in Southern California, and property taxes are expensive. And, me being ignorant of this space, my assumption was, okay, well, when a part of the city gets a certain density of population, then they got to build a new school, and they do that through, property taxes or the money that we pay out of the municipality. But it sounds to me like is the normal structure for some third party to be the owner and or basically the owner of the physical property, and then the school as an organization that's run by the state generally then rents from that that property owner. Like, tell me a little bit more, because this sounds like one of those just perverse commingling of government and private and the public sector that maybe the average person doesn't know about, and maybe and probably is super lucrative, and one of those things that doesn't really serve the primary goal of our tax dollars, which is to educate our kids. So could you tell me maybe just quick cliff notes on how most schools get built and held in perpetuity for the purpose of educating kids from the landlord perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to roll this back a little bit too into like, what is a charter school even?
Yep.
So there's a lot of, kind of misclassification or, kind of misunderstanding what a charter school is. A charter school is just a public district school. That's all it is. Only difference is that they get their kind of budget monies at the end of the school year, whereas the district school gets the money at the beginning of the school year.
Got it.
Really the only difference. But as you can imagine, that we don't get the money until the end, essentially creates an economic shortfall in year one that is chased every year after, right? Because you're always getting paid at the end. So that's a little bit of a kind of financial hurdle that charter has to get over. But again, a charter is just a public school. Okay, so let's start with that. The ways that schools, kind of initially were built in the country and the ways that schools get built now, very different. And then schools that were kind of built in original kind of plan for creating district school or public school, those kind of get moved around at times too. And that's based on, various fundamentals. Sometimes it's economics, sometimes it's politics, right? This kind of redistricting, if you will. A bunch of, neighborhood communities, filter out, and then the school, starts to lose attendance. The school borders on closure. Maybe the people have all moved to this side of town, so then a school opens up over there, if possible, right? And then I guess I'd say this too is like, San Diego, maybe specifically, I lived there for 18 years, so I can share my own experiences as well as what school is there, raise kids there too, is maybe not quite normative or with the rest of the country as far as like what a public school and how a public school gets built or how it gets serviced, and even what the outcome is at that school as well too. So it's probably not fair to use San Diego as a market measurer for what a public school or
it's not a good representation.
Bit of an outlier. We'll just go. It's probably an outlier. But you might imagine, one of the things here is like, initially, kind of the school system was, essentially kind of built as a public benefit with public funds for sure. But as the operation of schools continued for decades and decades now, I mean, we've got some schools these facilities are pretty old at this point. There hasn't been maybe enough operational upkeep and to kind of continue with the times, if you will. So really what you find today is more of a problem where, kind of the operational facilities expenses in these district schools is suffering or lacking. So they just get kind of decrepit and old, and they need to be fixed. And then we're in a bit of a, kind of an environment where it seems to me like school is in all of our hearts, but it's not definitive that it's in our wallets too. And so, lots of folks are happy to talk to us about school, but when it actually comes out to making contributions, it seems a bit more, it's a bit thinner. It's a bit harder of a stretch to get folks to, kind of reach deeply and contribute to school, as though we mostly feel in this country like it's our government's responsibility and they've got this taken care of. Yet again, we also see kids that aren't really maturing through school, and we don't have a lot of pride in our educational system or the kids that are coming out of it. So there's a paradox there that it seems to me we're not maybe talking about enough, as far as, hey, if we really do school, we probably need to reach into our pockets and fix some of these problems. And I'm talking about facilities problems. This is not a discussion about education, but it's actually about the place we call school itself.
Yeah, I guess one thing about the buildings.
Yeah, the facility. There's something about, the definition of school that feels more like the way that fish feel about the definition than people do. It's like school for us is this idea where it's this place where people share their experiences, and those shared experiences is really the kind of thing that we learn, if you will, and the thing that nourishes us and that we take away. And so maybe this is really about the fish tank than the fish that are in it, if you will, if I'm using an analogy here. But, like I said to you before, one of the things is as far as the kind of conditioning of the facility itself, and can we keep it at the right temperature so that, essentially the measurement here is, do we hear kids laughing? Then it works. Do we hear kids whimpering and crying? It's not working, right? So, there's kind of an easy way to understand what is a school and how well is it working. But there's other things that, you might not imagine that are part of the, kind of facility requirement that it does take to make kids, feel safe and feel nourished and those kinds of things. And sometimes that's, playground structures, and sometimes it's a bus. And so one of the other things that we do is we do gifts every year where we actually just write grant checks to schools. And almost every one of our schools gets a grant every year. And so we're able to kind of pick up a lot of those, kind of small, maybe not directly facilities, but also grounds related problems and resolve them. And then kind of back to your question, as far as like, how does a school get built and what is the status today? So the reality is that if you're in a district and you've got some schools with, kind of some suffering facilities, this formula works there too. Right. So there's nothing to say that we can't work with a district and take the facilities off their hands, finance them out, and then at the end of that financing, return them back to the district. So it just completely takes it off the books and we can get the school improved. Maybe, if that is some enrollment increases and that kind of thing too, we can, kind of help the environment and community rebuild, essentially, reconnect, rebrand even, if that's what it takes, reorganize in some cases. Sometimes there's administrators that need to change out and that kind of stuff too. So there's something that we've not found a way to define ourselves yet. It's like we continually hear back from the people that run our schools that you're not a landlord. This is something completely different. No landlord ever has shown up on our property. I mean, we send landscapers out, I guess I said, this is more of a family for us. It's a very heart-led, kind of charity, if you will. And so, I'd say it's nearly impossible to try to get a school built today unless you're kind of going outside of what I call the traditional, kind of avenue of, okay, let's go to the community and raise a public facilities bond and, get a school board and then build a school. We're in a place today where it seems to me that, the problem of school or the success of school is going to come from, ideas like this, organizations like this, getting involved at the deepest level that we can, walking the grounds, meeting the kids, meeting the facilitators, and really asking them what will they need and what can we do to increase this overall, kind of experience of school and the quality of it so that kids come out of there feeling extremely nourished. My whole thing is like, wouldn't it be great if like you had this kind of continued relationship with the school that you came from, that you felt, some, really meaningful definition of what it is to be an alumnus at that level. I mean, sometimes we get that coming out of the collegiate level, but it's pretty rare coming out of the younger grades. That's our sense here, is that somehow we think that we can, with a bunch of stuff that is not directly curriculum, that we can change at school to create this new experience, or maybe it's a renewed experience, where you've come through this program and you feel like that was your home or even your second home.
I love it. Another innovation, my kids during COVID, we, because they weren't reopening the schools, we moved down here to San Diego specifically and lived in our motorhome for a year and a half to put our kids into a co-op program down here. And, you heard the ideas during COVID of kind of these pods and, rich people are skating the rules to put their kids in these and to some degree, I totally sympathize with that. Like, parents, their number one priority is their kids and their learning, and parents will find a way, no matter, what government decides to put up in front of them as far as roadblocks. But, we ended up keeping our kids in these homeschool co-op environments. One school, 350 kids, another school, 650 kids. And they would operate in these third spaces, sometimes churches a lot of times, because churches had this kind of like interesting loophole to where you didn't have to be in an accredited school. You could be, even if there was no religious affiliation, you could kind of use the covering of a freedom of religion church clause to operate. But what I thought was the most interesting, not only being able to get the kids back in person in a learning environment with the least amount of health interdictions from COVID with that population that wasn't highly susceptible to transmission or bad outcomes. But I think the thing that was really interesting that I learned is, we started getting the teachers from, Horizon Preparatory School or Cathedral Catholic or Santa Fe Christian. They wanted to come and work at the school, not just because, they wanted to be back with students earlier, but they ended up staying because of the direct to teacher payment model, where essentially, the administrator or the person who runs the co-op is taking a very small fee to be an administrator, in fact, an administrator. And then all of the financing was passing from the parents or the charter that whatever those kids had enrolled in, and were getting charter funds from the government to then pay their vendors. And the teacher actually had some skin in the game, because if they had a class that was very popular and filled up, they would actually make a lot more money than if they were in like a salaried situation, maybe not the same type of benefits and pension and all the things that generally come with public school, tenure, but it was an interesting way of disrupting traditional systems.
Yeah,
it feels like,
but Dylan, like when you say that like the model of school is kind of up for grabs right now, like you guys just did, you kind of came up with your own model for school. It's success based, and everyone has a kind of a role in that success.
Yeah.
Right? Which to me creates this, opportunity so that I think it has a much higher degree of success, because you have all those attributes are, kind of self-promotion and growing the thing at kind of every level, which is not something we find in the traditional, kind of makeup of school or structure of school, where we have schools that are oriented around their curriculum, but there isn't a facility in the back end that can kind of run the business, if you will. That's like tell the community about what you're doing, so other parents that have new kids that move into the area know that the school exists, for example, right? Like, some kind of what you think of as maybe back office fundamentals for any other, at the end of the day, school is a business.
Yeah.
And so that part, as far as its facilitation or execution, can often lack and can often, kind of kill the outcome, if you will. So again, I'm congratulations, right? Like kudos to you, because I do see like we have to kind of configure the ways that we think about school, and maybe even let go of a bunch of the kind of fears or kind of traumas that we've accumulated over the past, whether even some of our own experiences with school. And then again, my sense is this invitation is this opportunity to think about school more as a, again, it's a school of fish, right? There's a bunch of beings that are kind of sharing an experience together, and that's really why they're there, right? So let's clean the bowl, And I think everything kind of starts from there. And that's, you guys found the place. You're like, let's put them together. We'll put the right people in the room. Just let it happen. So to some extent, for us, that's, what we're all about is we partner with people, with school administrators, right? These are our partners, our closely held partners. So we're all about, hey, how can we help you do what you do here in this place, and not just be this standoff, okay, well, we paid the property taxes. Is that all we could do?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Randy, why don't you tell us a little bit about, maybe we could deep dive a little bit on Wonderful FieldTrips, because I think that's a really interesting engagement model too. I think, you kind of talked about it, Troy, like sometimes it's hard to get, the philanthropic world interested in the idea of schools, because, there's some stigmas, right? Like one is, okay, well, we already pay taxes, so isn't the government supposed to do that? Then there's, people maybe of higher means have sent their kids to private school, so they don't have any affinity or connection with their local public school, except that it happens to be in their backyard. I have a school a few blocks from my house, and I don't send my kids to it, even though it's a top rated school in the area. So I don't really have a connection to it other than it's in my neighborhood. But Randy, when you talk about this idea of kind of executive engagement from the C-suite, from corporations, brands, bringing in this really interesting real world curriculum, but also creating an engagement mechanism with maybe somebody of a certain skill set, a certain profile, who then maybe does feel a connection and an affinity for those schools, because they're going in and they're rolling up their hands and they're meeting these kids, they're building relationships, and they're having a profoundly impactful, transformational experience. So I wonder about, how did that idea come to light for you guys? Obviously you created this really cool curriculum around a topic that was extremely interesting, which is, creator culture and influencer marketing and personal branding. But you guys have done this in a few other ways. So tell me a little bit about the genesis of this part of the foundation work. And I feel like it creates a really interesting feedback loop with engagement with, high profile people or companies, corporations who want to, give back and in some ways market, to their communities.
Yeah, well, as Troy said, we both grew up in upstate New York, and he's Western New York. I was actually Central New York near Syracuse, which is a different thing because he grew up in a town that had two professional sports teams. One of which, the Buffalo Bills, I still follow very closely. But we had college, and I was a big Syracuse basketball fan. Um, but I Troy started talking to me a couple of years ago about this, and he had the idea of doing some kind of experiences. He wasn't sure exactly how it would look, but I'd say once every month or every couple months, we'd have a conversation about what it would look like. And I remember early on me talking about my mom and how my small community of Liverpool, I mean, at least from my perspective, the way I looked at it, wouldn't have had much culture, arts, music, etc., if it weren't for my mom literally going door to door sometimes at the malls or at the strip malls or whatever else, just fundraising for. She helped create this thing called Adventure in the Arts, and all the elementary school kids would create this artwork during the course of the year. And then the spring, we do this big thing at the high school where all the art would be exhibited, and there were sponsors for the food and for different prizes and stuff like that. And up through during the whole mad mothers against drunk driving, all that stuff for senior prom, my mom put together this thing called God, I don't remember what the heck it was called, but it was an evening where she raised all this money and all these prizes from different people and different companies to give prizes away. So the kids would come to this dance, they'd have food, and they'd bid on, they'd get like raffle tickets or whatever, and then use those to bid on different items that they could take to college with them, like refrigerators and radios and whatever, alarm clocks, whatever else it was. And so when Troy and I were talking about that and how we would fund this stuff, I was like, yeah, this should be easy. We'll go to all these brands and we'll get them to sponsor these events or donate for these events. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not been as easy as one would hope. And one of the things people look at is on the foundation side, it's very interesting. If you're not in that world, it's very hard to break into that world. Um, just like anything else, right? And it's not any different than anything else. But foundation specifically, it's like there's a whole world around that, and a lot of people doing a lot of amazing work all over the place. And so getting other foundations to give money is a whole process, and
Yeah,
the whole grant.
the whole grant writing. I was going to say the grant writing thing is, it's like
Right.
responding to an RFP or something like that, right?
I
It's
mean,
got to be.
it's
Can you
worse.
do you fit in this box, right? Like,
Right,
if I put
exactly.
this in here, I could fit in. Or
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, I will say, I mean, this will be the first place we'll say this publicly, but we did receive yesterday word that we're getting a grant from the Home Depot
Congratulations.
to do thank you, to do a trades related thing. And Troy and I were on the phone for a couple hours yesterday and today talking about, well, what 'cause we described what it would look like from a very basic standpoint. For the RFP, it would be like, we'll frame out a wall and we'll do electrical and we'll do plumbing and stuff like that. But Troy always brings it to back to like, well, how can we do something that the kids are going to get excited about, and it brings it back. And I had this idea to do something else. So we're thinking about merging a couple of things together. But the idea at the end of the day is, like I was talking to you before, is that we believe not only that kids want to hear how and why they do what they do, but for the brands, for the companies, they have the opportunity to have a direct impact on kids, the kids that they want to reach. I mean, everyone's trying to figure out, especially with the way online has changed as well, how do brands get to Gen Z and Gen Alpha? And we have to be really careful because we're education, we're schools, that we're not making it look like people are brands are selling to kids. However, they do want to. It, the one thing that Troy's brought me around on is that, you know, it doesn't matter necessarily how, as long as it's, as long as it's decent, but we can bring these experiences and we can do all these things for kids, but if there's no money to do it, you can't do it. And so one way or another, we've got to figure it out. And at the end of the day, one thing my mom taught me was, well, if someone else isn't stepping up, you got to step up and do it. And as progressive a person as I am, and as opposed to Troy, I'm a very political person. I'm very aware, and I have my definite opinions on things. But it doesn't. But also, I'm an entrepreneur, just like Troy. We worked together early on to do some amazing things. And no matter what, we made it happen. We figured out one way or another how to make it happen. That's what we're doing here. And so when we go to a brand, if I talk to the CMO of Pepsi, for instance, and say, you guys are doing these in real life events anyway. How about sponsoring this? And how about we come up with something creative that teaches the kids something? And you guys can sponsor, feel good about it, have a direct impact, and at the same time reach the kids and create real relationships that can give you real feedback on what you are and what you're doing. And oftentimes they come up with some really cool things that they're doing in advertising that doesn't necessarily make the connection, but can make the connection. So so that's what we're doing. We're going to try to, and we've been trying to reach these brands and give them the story, tell them what we're doing. We have 27 schools in 7 states. As Troy kind of hinted at, there's the opportunity for growth there too, and as the market presents itself, we will do that. But right now, with 27 schools across 7 states, we have a reach that is really unique, and the fact that we own the schools is really unique. So when people talk about, oh well, what about this school that was sponsored? Yeah, but we have 7 states and we have 27 schools, and you can repeat these things across and build quite a campaign for these kids. So that's what we're trying to do. And again, I don't know, CMOs and marketing people are definitely not used to being pitched on this stuff, right? I mean, it's a very unique thing, and once again, we're absolutely trailblazing because I mean, when I talk to them, even at conferences, right? There was a Super Bowl ad week event here in San Francisco
Yeah, I was
where I
there.
live. Yeah, were you? Okay, so
Yeah.
and I talked to every one of those CMOs that was on there, and they all were like, "Oh, okay, okay." Follow-up's been a little different as it always is, especially in this day and age with everything being gated. I mean, since the pandemic, right? Everyone's figured out a way that you can't get to them, or they figured out a way to like put multiple gates. So and that's always been my job, how to get to people and figure it out. And we're trying, we're experimenting. But again, yesterday with that win with Home Depot, we're very excited because I think we finally we've broken through, and I think we have the opportunity to move forward with that and show others. There's a lot of other big grant opportunities that are a little bit more in play. I should say in our round, in right there in where we think we can land. But we also want to continue to have these conversations with marketing people about dedicating part of their budget for donation, because it's the same thing. It's the same money. It's the same, but it's a much more impactful opportunity for them. So
So
Yeah, and I think
Dylan, to
yeah.
your audience, like if you're a founder or you're an innovator, right, and you're out there, or you work for one of these folks, and they have this passion for the thing that got them there to start the thing that they're doing, right? That's the story that we would like to get told to these kids. So this is an invitation. Reach out to us. We've got kids who want to hear these stories. They want to become inspired. How and why did you do what you did? Or are you doing what you do, right?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And, on the branding side, I think about a brand like Home Depot, and, I remember taking my daughters to Home Depot in the parking lot and making birdhouses with them,
right, yeah,
like,
I do that with my son. I do it with his son all the time.
right?
Oh,
Like,
after a while he dreaded it, man, because I was always remodeling my house when he was growing up, and every time we get even close to Home Depot, I'd be like, "Hey, what do you say we just stop at the Home Depot?" And oh man, he was like, "Oh, okay," we disappear for hours in there, So
And it's funny
Yeah.
too, because like it's the new Radio Shack for if you're like a maker of any kind, right?
Oh,
Like, you
yeah.
got no
Mhm.
Radio Shack, so you go to Home Depot. Like, all right, I'll figure it out there.
Totally.
We tried to
Well,
pitch Radio Shack at
That's another
CES.
story.
Actually,
Another story.
I've
Yeah,
been trying
Radio
to get
Shack.
to them,
If
and
you're
we were like,
listening,
the two of
If
us
you're
were all
listening to
excited,
this,
and we're like pitching this to him, and he's like, his head was spinning. But especially when you go to those events, when you go to like CES stuff like that, and they're there to pitch you, and I've always turned it around, and Troy's always turning it around on them, and people's heads are spinning, and they're like, oh, okay, So yeah, it was
yeah, but if
funny.
you're listening, Radio Shack, we still want to talk. So
Yes, 100%.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I think didn't Radio Shack they got a really big the guy from America's Got Talent is their
Yeah.
I think part of their owner group. His name is forgetting me or is escaping me right now, but I think maybe that's a kind of a tie-in, right? Like when
they're based out of Florida right now, and they're trying to make a new, re-entry in a pretty cool way. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about like brands like Home Depot that already have have built the trust and permission to like educate and get hands-on with kids, through their marketing, because they provide tremendous value, right? They provide education, they provide the materials, they're a trusted, brand in their community. People, it's like
and they have a network of professional tradespeople also, right? Like
exactly. And it's a little different. Like, Pepsi, I love my friends at Pepsi, as long as they were bringing in healthy, drinks or something like that,
Sure.
versus,
Pepsi's
right here, they're on their way to, this
exactly. They got that.
No sugar,
I used to say that, and my little personal aside here is I had a bunch of time working with the folks at Red Bull.
Yeah.
In the media business, right? And I got a lot of time with, Dietrich Mateschitz when he was alive. And the thing that he would always say is that this is not a business about selling energy drinks in cans. This is a business about changing the world to make it a better place. And so he never cared about the 6 billion cans of Red Bull that were sold. What he cared about, what could be done with the profit from that changed the life of the people around him. So I can't just accept Pepsi as a, soft drink maker.
Yeah,
I think there's got to be some altruism in there. We all support it as a community, so some good must be coming out of that. Those are the stories that I want to get back to our kids, because, hey, maybe you're in a classroom and maybe your parents or your family works for the Pepsi company for generations, but you might want to do something different. Well, how do you fit that together? Well, hey, good. Just guess what? Inside of PepsiCo, we have this whole organization that's all about making life better. As an example, and I'm riffing here, but I learned that at Red Bull directly. So I got to feel that there's some altruism in all of these companies out there that we can bring out to kids.
Yeah, I think so. And, that's a lot of times brands, that's their difficultest problem to solve, is they've got these amazing philanthropic initiatives. They've got these give backs. They have these sustainability goals. They have these, innovational business models that are looking to disrupt and kill their own products and search for better things for their customers and humanity. But sometimes, those are the hardest stories for them to tell, because, when you're tooting your own horn, sometimes it feels maybe a little self-celebratory or greenwashing, or, but when you can partner with an organization that gives you credibility and storytelling opportunities, I think, those are the stories that people want to see and are more susceptible to, responding positively, when I think, sadly, America's trust for institutions, including corporations, are at all-time lows. But the ones that do great things in the world, Patagonia comes to mind, others.
Right.
Like others like that. Or I love that Red Bull example, because it's not the first. It's not the first time I've heard that. And also you look at their marketing. Their marketing was never about, you never saw a can. It was about guys jumping out of, space capsules and, accomplishing the greatest feats of humanity, the highest level of human and performance and endurance. So,
and if you're a major consumer brand and you've planted 1 billion trees, 6th graders aren't reading press releases. They're not going to know that, right? And so this is my whole point. Is like you said, it's like, this is really what we see is currently the only way to get the kind of message out that's not part of the general direct product message. Again, the altruism, the how and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I love it. All right, so you've piloted this initial example with with LA models.
So tell me, to FieldTrips. We've seen 1,000 kids in schools already as the last school year, and we're currently scheduling up FieldTrips for this coming year. One of the ones we're excited about is called Positive Connection. Maybe go on to the wonderfulfieldtrip.org site. which is newly launched, and we've also newly relaunched our own site at www.wonderfulfoundations.org as well. And essentially, you can read about a gentleman who was significant in the aftermath of 9/11 and has made a name for himself, I guess, and a career in giving back post that experience. As we might imagine, he's written books and things like that. You can read all about kind of his experience with that. You can imagine how life-changing that must have been.
Yeah.
And so how reorganized this individual is. And so we're really excited to get him out in front of kids and get kids to really connect with him. And this field trip is really all about creating, intimate human to human connection, especially in today's world where that can often be really tough, when we, a lot of us are kind of pretty curious about our own opinions and want to present them loudly and wildly, right? So we're excited about Positive Connection. And as Randy and us, we're celebrating today that we have a new partnership with Home Depot Foundation. And so we're currently, over the next couple of weeks, brainstorming of what we're going to bring out into the classrooms from that side of things as well.
I love it.
And in terms of,
Randy.
if it's okay, in terms of that, I mean, Troy and I are kind of going back and forth on what that could morph into. The idea is there's obviously a lot of understanding that there's a shortage of tradespeople in the country, and so now companies like Home Depot and BlackRock and others are putting grant opportunities out there to fill that pipeline. And our idea is with 27 schools in 7 states, we can help build that pipeline, but from a much earlier standpoint. So we can bring in, say, like 6th to 9th graders into it, teach them some things, and get them into that pipeline earlier, so that they see that it's a possibility. A lot of kids don't even think about it, right? Their parents are like education, lawyer, doctor, engineer, whatever. And the reality is not all of them are going to go that way. So we're going to do, yeah, or want to. So, but to tie it all in, like, and Troy, this, all right, I think, Troy and I have been kind of going back and forth, and I had this idea a couple months ago, and I started trying to reach some of the coffee companies, for instance, about, hey, what about sponsoring a field trip where the kids learn entrepreneurialism and how to create a little business, but also teach them how to work in that business too. And so from the ground up. And one of the things we were thinking about was, well, we could do a field trip where we're building like a little space, and then also have a coffee stand or
pop-up coffee cart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the lemonade stand in a box idea.
Exactly.
Every kid is up, including mine, have gone out on the corner, and it's kind of the 101 venture of every kid is the lemonade stand. So that can be easily translated into a lot of different ideas.
Right. So we're trying
to make your own future. Right.
Right. Yeah, so it's like built literally from the ground up. And so we've got Home Depot now. We're going to be trying to get some other grants and sponsors, but also there are brand opportunities there where a coffee company could come in, like a Starbucks or one of the new ones. There's like that 7 something and Dutch Brothers and others that try to reach out to their CMOs or their brand marketing people and say, hey, what about sponsoring this and bringing in the coffee and bring in the other tools that we need for this, or having a little pop-up where all the money goes back to the school, or as a revenue share, whatever. The reality is as the owner of the actual building and property, there's so many unique things we can do. And as long as it benefits the kids and the kids are getting a really cool experience, that's what we want to do. So from a brand perspective, that's what we're trying to reach, those who want to do something really cool, unique. And that's the other thing. If brands had an idea of something else, we're open to the idea of like, hey, come in, let's co-create, let's do something really cool that's repeatable, and we can do across our schools, and ultimately we can bring to other schools as well. It doesn't just have to be our schools. As long as the money's there, we'll bring it everywhere. And now we have that experience of being, facilitating these really cool experiences, and we can, and with our background anyway, we've done things across the world. We just take that experience, from from putting the book together on each step of how it's done, and we can take it and facilitate it everywhere.
That's awesome. So if a brand has an objection to scale, 29 schools isn't enough impact for me, you guys can reach outside of your ownership network because you're well connected in this ecosystem. You could scale to 100, 1,000 schools if the budgets were there to support a program like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about building a platform that can scale for sure, right? And so, we prototyped that last year, and we feel, kind of ready and able to, handle kids in all schools, if you will. And I guess I'd say this, Dylan, I mean, if you've ever been a kid or you've had kids, then it is appropriate, right, to, kind of take a look at some of these materials and, think about this. Just like for a $50 donation, a kid has a field trip experience. To me, that feels pretty good, as far as like, what can I do? How can I support folks, and how do I get involved? Is this, kind of the simplest and least you could do. Click the link, put $50 in the pot. The most, make a phone call, especially if someone out there listening and somebody inspiring that you feel would be appropriate here and would want to get out there in front of kids in classrooms and tell them about how and why they do what they do. Reach out to us. We're looking to build that network.
I love it. Randy, you guys talked a little bit about, kids and the influencer, the aspiration to become a creator and an influencer and what that actually means and feels like. And then you've got these other great components, a partnership with Home Depot with a mission and an idea around trades, because that there's this trades deficit, and that's something that Home Depot cares about. And it's something that kids should be thinking about as they move into this, AI driven economy where 25% of Gen Z right now that's graduating and entering the workforce has trained for jobs that may not exist anymore. And the cost of college and, the reality that not every kid needs to go to college, and there are totally awesome, fulfilling jobs and ability to also be an entrepreneur. A lot of people don't realize is the trades is generally a pathway into entrepreneurship too. Right. Once you apprentice for a while, then you're a business owner, and you get all the things that come with that. Right. Have you thought about kind of the spokesperson or the influencer marketing component of that program? Like, Mike Rowe, for instance, comes to mind as somebody who goes on a lot of podcasts and talks about the topic of, trades and from all the time that he spent, in the trenches and that TV show Dirty Jobs, hanging out with people, from that world. Have you thought about kind of the three-legged stool brand, you guys, but also kind of an influencer that can be the top end of that? Yeah, for sure. And I don't know Mr. Rowe myself, and Mr. Rowe, if you're listening, we'd love to talk to you. And Dylan, if I'll make that introduction for sure. Invitation absolutely open. Maybe as an example of that, when we started to think about influencer, one of the first things that came up was the Outdoor Boys. So if you're not tuned into Outdoor Boys or kind of where he is now or what he, and the timing was kind of amazing, because as we were starting to come out there with this, he was just ending the, kind of the experience of the Outdoor Boys and saying to the world, hey, I'm ending this. My kids are getting older, but I want to help other kids do this too. And if his kid's got a going channel as well now too. So we did reach out, didn't hear back. And I'm sure in that moment too, he was very inundated with offers and invitations. That was a big announcement. But, I would say we do think about that. We do think about that quite often. There's a few others that we're, quietly talking to out there, as well as becoming, kind of those ambassadors, if you will. And that is an invitation. So, if you represent someone in that world, or you are someone in that world, please reach out to us. Again, if the offer we have is we have 15,000 kids waiting to hear your story. Wow. I don't know what else there's to say besides that. Right? Oh, and by the way, if you want to, if you want to share this with your daughter to post to her 54,000 followers, it's her followers are a bunch of other teenage girls, but I'm sure there's some moms in there as well. So, we'd still be happy to get on her podcast if we can get on the invite list. If we had any idea she was your daughter, we would have been like, well, wait, we'll do this one, but could we do hers? Like, right. For sure.
But no, it's funny you brought Mike Rowe up, because my dog and I, Crypto, go down to the Ace Hardware around the corner every day because they give him treats. And I was asking about, hey, before we got the Home Depot stuff, hey, you guys got a connection at Ace? And the first thing first thing my friend said to me was, hey, that dirty job thing? You should reach out to those guys. So.
Yeah.
So that's universe telling me we got to.
Universe is.
Yep. Yeah. And Mike,
is,
if you're listening, we're coming for you.
I love it. I love it. One of the things that I thought was interesting too is that you guys have, a foundational rule listed on the field trip from an immersive design thinking experiences.
Yeah.
No worksheets. Students build real prototypes. They capture their learning through video reflections. You've talked about a couple of these, very tactical things that you've designed into the experience. Can you talk a little bit about, the hands-on design thinking, but also the video reflection component? What does that do when a kid has to, there's a TikTok trend right now of parents forcing their kids to order food at the driveway, at the McDonald's, drive-through, and really it's like giving them an opportunity to practice to like have a coherent conversation with somebody, with somebody as a young person in kind of a low stakes environment. But what is that, video reflection, kind of like having a kid turn on a camera and have to articulate their thoughts? Like, what is that muscle that you're trying to move there?
And there's probably a through line with most of our programming, and it has to do with advocacy, self-advocacy. So what you're going to find in most of our things is, we come back to any one of these programs, anytime we go out, to meet a kid, it's really all about what inside of them is this going to light up and enable, right? Like what is this going to connect for them inside of them that allows them to go use that into the world, right? And so like just as you said, also too is the invitation or the how wide is the door for the kid is also, I think there's a lot of, kind of thinking that goes on around that. You can imagine not every kid wants to get in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And that, kind of panic moment alone can create, I can tell you stories of raising my own kids where it's just not going to happen that way. But once you say to a kid, well, there's another job here, which is hold the camera, they step forward. They're like, oh, wait, I didn't know that was a job too. Right. And before you know it, that kid behind the camera is kind of sneaking around in front of the camera every once in a while too. So there's something about making this stuff, kind of open in a way that kids can feel their way into it and not be thrown off the bus or off the cliff into it, that we're finding, success with. So it's identify, maybe that kind of inner aspect of self that we feel could be lit up or opened up in the kid, and then find 3 or 4 ways to open that up, not just this one way. So as you might imagine, there's a bunch of kids who run to the front of the camera and they're really excited about telling their stories. And then there are other kids who see the support of helping someone else tell the story and find their own way to tell their own story too. And that's what we were seeing is like, again, even the kids that were holding the cameras were ultimately the kids that came around and got in front of the cameras too. So it shows us something that as long as you create this kind of openness and kids aren't kind of feeling judged on the way in, they're just going to keep exploring. And even the ones that started out not being one behind the camera find their ways to the front of it, is the example with influencer, if you will. So, maybe in the same, with the trades too, is like, maybe I'm not a kid who comes from a family where the, people around me are picking up power tools and going at repairs themselves, but maybe I'm curious about that. And maybe I just never thought it was a safe enough world for me to pick up those tools. Well, then maybe here's an opportunity for you to do something that you never thought you'd have ability to or access to. That opens up a whole new relationship or resource with yourself as well. I have some capabilities that I didn't know I have. So, maybe at the end of that, I would say is like, this field trip is a field trip of self-discovery. And it's not discovery of the world around you as much as a discovery of the world that's inside of you already, and how to kind of bridge that and open that up to be expressed into the outside world, if you will. So, I love it. Pretty metaphysical. By design and by intention, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, it's cool stuff, man. It's funny as as I reflect on your guys' career as being kind of early pioneers and opening up the internet, and then you mentioning some of the failings around the idea of distance learning, and I think we all got a crash course in distance learning during COVID,
Yeah,
and
right.
could see the benefits and the drawbacks of flexibility and learning at your own pace, but just it impresses upon me, guys like you that had success building things on the internet come back to, caring about physical spaces, the environment in which kids learn in a tactile way together in classrooms and in facilities. And then also the idea of bringing real people into classroom environments where, you have the opportunities to, essentially, bring in real world perspective from things that they don't teach in a classroom. So
Yeah, end
I think
to end connection, right? It's not just a
yeah,
theory. You get to actually kind of go in there and do something with that, apply that, if you will.
yeah, I love
And
it.
it's easy to get kids to be excited about this because they get an hour to 3 hour break from their traditional schedule too. So it's we've had great success so far, and we're really excited about kind of what happens next.
Awesome. Well, Troy, I want to give you an opportunity to plug where people can learn more and tap in. So
Yeah.
if folks want to follow along with your personal thought leadership and thinking, and or reach out to Wonderful Foundations, where would you like to send people to stay in touch?
Yeah, for sure. Go to www.wonderfulfoundations.org or wonderfulfieldtrip.org. Learn all about the things we do, both with the facilities themselves as well as the programming on the ground. And then, yeah, for sure, I'm on LinkedIn, just Troy Snyder on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to find me, I'm happy to connect over this. Or, again, you'll see me in a lot of different, kind of pathways. I do a lot of things out there, and I'm just happy to collaborate with folks. All about making this a better place to be. I'm here for a while. I think you all are here too. So let's do the best we can with it, if we will.
I love it, man. Awesome. Well, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us today. And for those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe. If you're listening, whatever podcast platform you're listening on, a honest review helps us find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there's somebody out there in the world who's done well in their career and maybe wants to give back to this important cause of how our kids are learning and inspiring the next generation, or maybe a person in brand world or the marketing world who has an opportunity to use some of their marketing dollars to impact kids and tell interesting stories about educating the next generation, or just somebody who you think would benefit from the conversation that I had with Troy and his colleague Randy today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I'll wish you guys all a great day. Appreciate you coming on, Troy.